From a chance book party that convinced an author to allow film adaptations to Russell Crowe climbing 137 feet above the ocean without safety gear, the making of Master and Commander's HMS Surprise was anything but ordinary. With actors buying their own props out of pocket, 27 miles of specially made rope that had to twist the wrong direction, and a practice self-surgery scene involving butter knives and mirrors, this epic naval film hid some of the strangest production secrets in Hollywood history. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Master and Commander's HMS Surprise. Fact 1. A casual comment at a party changed film history. For years, author Patrick O'Brian absolutely refused to let anyone turn his beloved Aubrey Maturin novels into movies. He was protective of his work and didn't believe Hollywood could do justice to the intricate world he had created across 20 books chronicling the adventures of Captain Jack Aubrey and ship surgeon Stephen Maturin during the Napoleonic Wars. No matter how many studios came knocking or how much money they offered, O'Brian's answer was always a firm no. Everything changed at a publisher's party in New York in the late 1990s. The publishing house W.W. Norton and Company had rented the HMS Rose, a full-scale replica of an 18th-century British frigate, for a pierside celebration of O'Brian's latest novel. The event was meant to be a simple book launch party, but it turned into something much more significant. O'Brian himself attended the gathering, walking the decks of the tall ship and taking in the details of the replica vessel. During the party, O'Brian struck up a casual conversation with Richard Bailey, the captain of the HMS Rose. As they talked, O'Brian mentioned almost offhandedly that if the Rose were painted in an 1805 color scheme, she would be a dead ringer for the frigate Surprise that appeared throughout his books. It was just a passing observation, the kind of comment you might make while admiring a piece of historical recreation. But Bailey took it seriously. He immediately ordered his crew to break out the paint and make the changes right then and there. While the party continued, the crew set to work transforming the ship's appearance to match O'Brian's vision. The author was so impressed by their enthusiasm and dedication, and by how closely the repainted Rose resembled his imagined Surprise, that he changed his mind about his long-standing prohibition against film adaptations. Norton and Company seized the moment and immediately began looking for a Hollywood production company to bring the novels to screen. That spontaneous paint job on a New York pier directly led to the 2003 film Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World, with that same HMS Rose serving as the actual ship used in filming. Fact 2. Russell Crowe bought his own violin because the budget couldn't. When filming began for Master and Commander in Rosarito, Mexico, the props department handed Russell Crowe a dark and heavy German violin to use throughout the movie. But the actor immediately felt something was wrong with it. Crowe believed that his character, Captain Jack Aubrey, despite being gruff and battle-hardened, would naturally play a much finer and more elegant instrument given his refined musical tastes and officer status. Director Peter Weir completely agreed with Crowe's assessment, recognizing that the cheaper prop violin didn't match the sophistication of a Royal Navy captain who enjoyed playing classical music in his spare time. But there was a significant problem that no one had anticipated during pre-production. The film's massive $150 million budget, which had already been allocated to building replica ships, creating elaborate costumes, and filming on location in Mexico and the Galapagos Islands, simply couldn't absorb the additional cost of purchasing a proper period-appropriate violin. Rather than compromise on the authenticity of his character or accept the unsuitable prop, Crowe decided to solve the problem himself by purchasing the instrument with his own money. He contacted his friend Richard Tognetti from the Australian Chamber Orchestra, who also happened to be teaching him how to play violin for the role, and asked him to track down something more suitable for Captain Aubrey. Tognetti found a beautiful violin crafted in 1890 by the respected Italian violin maker Leandro Bisiach in Milan. Although the instrument was made slightly later than the film's 1805 setting, it was built in the style of Guarneri, meaning it perfectly matched the shape and design that a British naval captain of that era could have realistically purchased. The violin was a serious concert-level instrument, and Crowe kept it for years after filming wrapped, even using it occasionally when he played music at home. The story took an unexpected turn in April 2018 when Crowe auctioned off the violin as part of a sale he called The Art of Divorce to help fund his divorce settlement from singer Danielle Spencer. The Bisiach violin sold for 135,000 Australian dollars, which converted to approximately 104,000 US dollars, making it one of the highest-priced movie memorabilia items in the entire auction. Fact 3. The ship was hired with a ceremonial sword gift. In the late 1990s, Tom Rothman, who was then an executive at 20th Century Fox, had been trying for years to turn Patrick O'Brian's beloved naval novels into a major motion picture. He had first attempted to develop the project back in 1993 when he was working at the Samuel Goldwyn Company, but the rights had slipped away to Touchstone Pictures before he could make it happen. When Rothman eventually became the chief executive at Fox, he managed to reacquire the film rights in 1998, and he immediately knew exactly which director he wanted for the job. Peter Weir, the acclaimed Australian filmmaker behind movies like The Truman Show and Dead Poets Society, was at the top of his list, but there was one significant problem. Weir had already turned down an earlier opportunity to direct an O'Brian adaptation because he didn't think the material would translate well to film, telling people that he loved the books but just couldn't see them working on screen. Rothman needed a different approach to convince Weir, so instead of scheduling a traditional pitch meeting with presentations and talking points, he decided to do something completely unexpected. When Weir arrived for their meeting, Rothman started the conversation by telling him directly that he wasn't going to pitch him a story at all. Instead, he said he was going to give him a gift. Then Rothman left the room entirely, leaving Weir sitting there wondering what was happening. When Rothman returned moments later, he was carrying a sword. He handed the weapon to Weir without any elaborate explanation, and Weir immediately understood the reference. He asked simply, "O'Brian?" And Rothman responded with just a few words. "Yes, I want you to take command." The symbolic gesture worked perfectly, appealing to Weir's imagination and sense of adventure in a way that no PowerPoint presentation ever could have. Weir eventually agreed to direct the film, though he insisted on one condition. Rather than making an origin story based on the first book in the series, he wanted to start somewhere in the middle with one of the long voyages, which is exactly what they did by choosing the 10th novel as their primary source material. Fact 4, 27 miles of rope had to be specially made to twist the wrong way when the production team began outfitting the replica ship that would become HMS Surprise. They quickly discovered that one of the most essential elements of an 18th century warship couldn't simply be purchased from a modern supplier. The ship's working rigging required approximately 27 miles of rope, which sounds like a straightforward shopping list until you learn about a peculiar detail that most people would never even think to consider: the direction that rope twists. Modern rope is manufactured with what's called a right-hand lay, meaning the strands spiral in a clockwise direction as they're twisted together. This has been the standard in rope making for decades, and it's what you'll find if you walk into any hardware store today. However, during the Napoleonic era, when Master and Commander is set, rope was made with a left-hand lay, twisting in the opposite counterclockwise direction. This wasn't just some minor aesthetic difference that only the most obsessive historians would notice. The filmmakers were committed to creating a ship that looked and functioned exactly as it would have in 1805, and that meant every detail had to be period accurate, right down to which way the fibers twisted in the rigging. Because authentic left-hand lay rope simply doesn't exist as a mass-produced product anymore, the production had to commission rope makers to specially manufacture every single foot of those 27 miles using traditional techniques. This wasn't a quick process either, as the rope had to be strong enough to actually support the ship's masts and sails during filming, meaning it needed to meet both historical accuracy standards and modern safety requirements. The cost and time involved in creating this custom rope work added significantly to the production's already massive attention to detail. But it's exactly this kind of commitment that helped make Master and Commander feel so authentically transported to another era when audiences watched the final film. Fact 5. Paul Bettany practiced self-surgery. with butter knives at home. One of the most memorable and intensely visceral scenes in Master and Commander shows Dr. Stephen Maturin performing emergency surgery on himself after being accidentally shot in the stomach during a bird hunting expedition. And to prepare for this grueling moment, Paul Bettany took his method, acting to an unexpectedly strange place in his own kitchen. The actor revealed in interviews that he spent time at home sitting in front of a mirror with a butter knife, repeatedly going through the motions of what it would look like to extract a bullet from his own abdomen while watching his reflection, trying to understand the precise hand movements and the awkward reverse perspective that his character would experience during the actual procedure. This wasn't just about getting the physical choreography right, but about understanding the deeply unsettling psychological experience of operating on yourself while looking at everything backwards in a mirror, which adds an extra layer of difficulty and disorientation to an already horrifying situation. In the film, Maturin uses a mirror to guide his hands as he makes an incision and extracts the musket ball from his own flesh, all while remaining conscious and enduring unimaginable pain with only minimal assistance from his young surgeon's mate. And Bettany wanted to capture the authentic awkwardness and difficulty of trying to control your hands when everything you see is reversed. The butter knife rehearsals at home allowed him to practice the strange hand-eye coordination required when your brain has to process mirror-reversed movements, similar to the challenge of trying to write your name while looking only at its reflection. Beyond the butter knife practice, Bettany also traveled to the Royal College of Surgeons in London to study 18th century surgical instruments and techniques, learning how naval surgeons of the Napoleonic era would have approached emergency procedures with the limited tools and knowledge available to them at the time. Interestingly, Bettany also admitted in interviews that he personally dislikes insects and found them difficult to work with during the film's naturalist scenes because they tend to scamper and scuttle unpredictably. But apparently practicing self-surgery with kitchen utensils was somehow less unsettling to him than handling bugs on camera. Fact 6. The film's first feature shoot on the Galapagos. Used dyed regular iguanas, Master and Commander holds a unique distinction as the first feature film ever granted permission to shoot on the protected Galapagos Islands. But one of the most memorable scenes involving the island's famous wildlife was actually created using movie magic hundreds of miles away. When audiences watched the crew members chasing marine iguanas across the volcanic rocks during their brief shore leave, they were actually watching ordinary green iguanas that had been carefully dyed black to look like the endemic species. The production team faced significant challenges when it came to filming on the Galapagos, as the island's delicate ecosystem is strictly protected by Ecuadorian authorities and international conservation agreements. While director Peter Weir and a minimal crew were allowed to bring Paul Bettany and cameramen to the islands for establishing shots and scenes of Maturin exploring the unique landscape, they had to follow extremely strict guidelines to avoid disturbing the wildlife or damaging the fragile environment. The Galapagos Conservation Trust assured the public that no harm came to the island's infrastructure or native species during filming. However, when it came to the more active scenes requiring actors to interact directly with the animals, particularly the sequence where crew members attempt to catch marine iguanas for fresh meat, the production couldn't risk chasing or handling the real protected creatures. Instead, the filmmakers shot these scenes at Todos Santos, near the southern tip of Baja California, in Mexico, where they brought in regular green iguanas and transformed them with black dye to resemble their Galapagos cousins. This creative solution allowed the production to get the dynamic footage they needed without putting any actual marine iguanas at risk or violating the strict conservation rules that made shooting on the real islands possible in the first place. The hybrid approach worked perfectly, blending the authentic Galapagos landscapes with the manufactured iguana chase scenes so seamlessly that most viewers never noticed the difference, proving that sometimes the best way to honor a location is knowing when to fake it. Fact 7. Polish extras were cast for their wrong faces. When director Peter Weir began casting extras for Master and Commander, he made an unusual decision that had nothing to do with saving money and everything to do with authenticity. He specifically traveled to Poland to recruit people who would appear in the background scenes aboard the HMS Surprise. But his reasoning was far from ordinary. Weir wasn't looking for trained actors or people with impressive resumes. He was searching for faces that looked like they belonged in the early 1800s, and he believed he could find them in Eastern Europe. According to Weir himself, there was something distinctly different about faces from what had been the Soviet Empire, something that modern Western faces simply didn't have anymore. These were people who had grown up under completely different circumstances, with different diets and, more importantly, different expectations about life. Weir explained that they didn't grow up with what he called Kodak moments, those carefully posed family photographs that became so common in Western culture. Without that constant awareness of cameras and image making throughout their lives, these Polish extras didn't project to the lens in the same practiced way that people from other backgrounds did. This obsession with authentic faces came from Weir's deep study of early photography, particularly the work of David Octavius Hill from the 1840s. When looking at these historic photographs, especially early images of tribal peoples and working-class individuals, Weir noticed that the subjects weren't sending messages to the camera or performing for it. There was a raw, unguarded quality to their expressions that had disappeared from modern photography. Actor James D'Arcy, who played First Lieutenant Pullings, later recalled working with these Polish stunt extras during action scenes and remembered they didn't speak English, which added to the challenge of coordinating complex battle sequences. But their weathered, un-Hollywood faces helped create the gritty, realistic atmosphere that made the film so convincing, even if it meant Weir had to go halfway around the world to find exactly what he was looking for. Fact 8. The Lord of the Rings effects team built the miniature ships. When it came time to create the miniature ships for Master and Commander, director Peter Weir knew exactly who to call. And it was the same team that had just finished bringing Middle-earth to life on the big screen. New Zealand's Weta Workshop, the legendary effects house that had built everything from the towering structures of Minas Tirith to the intricate details of Rivendell for the Lord of the Rings trilogy, was brought on board to construct the detailed ship miniatures that would be used throughout the film. Weta Workshop had earned its reputation as one of the world's premier special effects companies through its groundbreaking work on Peter Jackson's epic fantasy films, and the studio was particularly famous for what they called bigatures, which were miniatures built at such large scales that they could capture incredible amounts of detail. For Master and Commander, they applied this same meticulous approach to creating scale models of both the HMS Surprise and the French privateer Acheron, along with various other vessels that appear in the film's establishing shots and distant battle sequences. These weren't simple toy boats floating in a bathtub. The miniatures were crafted with painstaking attention to historical accuracy, matching the full-scale ships down to individual ropes, railings, and cannon ports. The Weta team worked closely with the film's historical consultants to ensure that every aspect of the miniature ships reflected authentic Napoleonic-era naval architecture, from the proper angle of the masts to the correct placement of fighting tops. The miniatures were filmed using sophisticated camera techniques that Weta had perfected during the Lord of the Rings trilogy, blending the model shots seamlessly with live-action footage and computer-generated effects. This combination of traditional model-making craftsmanship and cutting-edge technology allowed the filmmakers to create sweeping ocean vistas and dramatic long-distance battle scenes that would have been impossible to capture with the full-scale replica ships alone. The end result was a visual richness that helped earn Master and Commander its Academy Award for Best Cinematography in 2004, with Weta Workshop's miniatures playing a crucial but largely invisible role in bringing the Age of Sail to life on screen. Fact 9. Russell Crowe climbed to the crow's nest without a harness. When you're trying to capture the most authentic shot possible for a historical naval epic, sometimes safety takes a backseat to getting the perfect image on camera, and that's exactly what happened during one particularly dangerous moment in the filming of Master and Commander. Russell Crowe, who was already known for doing many of his own stunts and pushing himself physically for roles, took things to an extreme level when he climbed to the crow's nest of the HMS Surprise replica without wearing any safety equipment whatsoever, despite being 137 feet above the churning ocean below. The shot in question was being filmed from a helicopter and required both Crowe and his co-star, James D'Arcy, who played First Lieutenant Tom Pullings, to scale the ship's rigging all the way up to the crow's nest at the very top of the mast. Darcy was smart enough to wear a safety harness during the climb, which would protect him if he lost his grip or slipped on the ropes, but Crowe had a different idea about how the scene should be filmed. He insisted that wearing the harness would be visible on camera and would ruin the authenticity of the shot, so he refused to put one on and made the entire climb completely unprotected. Darcy later recalled the experience in interviews, describing how he watched Crowe scale the rigging without any safety gear and thought to himself that he would never take such a risk. The climb wasn't just dangerous because of the height involved, but also because they were filming on the actual ocean with the ship rocking and swaying beneath them, which would make maintaining balance on the narrow rigging even more difficult. One wrong move or loss of grip could have resulted in a catastrophic fall into the water or onto the deck far below. This commitment to realism and willingness to put himself in genuine danger was typical of Crowe's approach to the entire production, as he learned to sail the ship himself and took his role as captain seriously both on and off camera. Fact 10. Crowe instituted a color-coded shirt ranking system. Russell Crowe didn't just play Captain Jack Aubrey on screen. He actually brought the rigid hierarchy of a Napoleonic-era warship to life behind the scenes in a way that might seem unusual for a modern film set. To help create an authentic sense of naval discipline and rank, Crowe instituted a color-coded shirt system that every single actor had to follow throughout the entire production, whether the cameras were rolling or not. Officers wore dark blue shirts, midshipmen wore light blue, Marines wore red, and everyone else in the crew wore white. This wasn't just for costume purposes during filming. The actors wore these color-coded shirts all the time on set, which meant that at any given moment you could immediately tell who outranked who just by looking at what someone was wearing. But Crowe took this attention to detail even further in a way that really drove home the commitment he wanted from his cast. Each actor received 3 different shirts in their rank's designated color: a tank top, a short-sleeve shirt, and a long-sleeve top, and they all came with one catch. The actors weren't simply handed finished costumes ready to wear. Instead, they had to personally sew their own name badges onto each and every shirt themselves. This meant that every single member of the cast, from Russell Crowe himself down to the youngest midshipman, had to sit down with needle and thread and attach their name tags to all 3 shirts by hand. Crowe's reasoning behind this unusual requirement was all about fostering a genuine sense of authority and naval tradition on set. He wanted the actors to truly feel like they were part of a ship's crew with a real chain of command, not just performers showing up to recite lines. By making everyone wear their rank visibly at all times and putting in the personal effort to prepare their own uniforms, Crowe believed the cast would naturally internalize the social structure of an 1800-era British warship. The system apparently worked, helping the actors stay in character and maintain the authentic relationships between officers and crew that made the film feel so believable. Fact 11. The film used the Titanic's giant water tank. When Peter Weir set out to create the most authentic naval warfare film ever made, he faced a crucial problem that has plagued every director who's attempted to film at sea. Shooting on actual ocean waters is unpredictable, dangerous, and incredibly expensive, with weather delays and rough seas making it nearly impossible to capture the precise shots needed for a major Hollywood production. Weir studied books about previous attempts to film nautical movies, reading extensively about the disasters that befell productions like John Huston's Moby Dick and Steven Spielberg's Jaws, and came to one conclusion: don't film at sea. But he still needed a way to make the HMS Surprise look like it was battling genuine ocean storms and cannon fire, which is where an unlikely savior came to the rescue. Just 6 years before Master and Commander began production, James Cameron had built something extraordinary at Fox Studios in Baja California, Mexico. For his epic disaster film Titanic, Cameron constructed what was then the largest outdoor water tank in the world, spanning 6.5 acres and capable of holding nearly 20 million gallons of water. After Titanic wrapped, this massive facility sat mostly unused, and the producers of Master and Commander saw an incredible opportunity. They secured the tank for their production, essentially inheriting one of the most expensive and sophisticated filming locations ever created. But having a giant tank wasn't enough, because the HMS Rose, the actual replica ship they'd purchased for exterior shots, was too valuable and fragile to risk for the intense battle sequences Weir had planned. So the production team spent 4 months constructing an entirely new HMS Surprise from scratch, a 60-ton replica built specifically for the tank. This second ship was placed on gimbals that could tilt and rocket violently to simulate storm conditions and battle damage, while the tank's wave machines created realistic ocean swells around it. Every detail was painstakingly recreated, from the individual lanterns hanging below deck to the artificially aged sails and the weathered wood of the hull. The combination of Cameron's engineering marvel and this detailed replica allowed Weir to shoot weeks of footage in controlled conditions, capturing the violent chaos of naval warfare without ever risking his cast and crew on the unpredictable open ocean. Fact 12. A 13-year-old was cast for playing at Cambridge. When director Peter Weir needed to find young actors who could convincingly portray teenage midshipmen aboard an 1800s warship, he took an unusual approach by visiting Cambridge University to set up audition workshops. At St. Catherine's College, a 13-year-old student named Max Purkis decided to attend one of these workshops without any serious intentions of becoming an actor, later describing it as something he did on a lark just to see what would happen. Purkis had only performed in a few school plays at his previous school and had no formal training or particular ambitions in the film industry, making his attendance at the audition almost a casual afterthought rather than a calculated career move. Despite his lack of experience and the fact that he wasn't particularly serious about acting at the time, something about Purkis immediately caught Peter Weir's attention during the workshop sessions. The director saw a quality in the young student that perfectly matched what he was looking for in the character of Midshipman Lord Blakeney, a well-born young officer who loses his arm during battle but continues to serve with remarkable courage and composure. Weir cast Purkis in the role, which required him to miss half a term at his school, though the young actor later said he didn't mind the absence since he already had a strong interest in history that aligned well with the film's period setting. The role turned out to be Purkis's very first appearance in a motion picture, and he held his own acting alongside Academy Award winner Russell Crowe and the rest of the professional cast. His performance earned him critical acclaim, including a Young Artist Award and the Most Promising Newcomer Prize at the 2003 Evening Standard British Film Awards. What makes this casting story particularly remarkable is that it all started with a university student who wasn't even looking for an acting career, attending an audition purely out of curiosity, and ending up in one of the most historically accurate naval films ever made. Fact 13. Crowe called learning violin the hardest thing ever. Russell Crowe has built a career playing some of the most physically demanding roles in Hollywood, from the brutal gladiatorial combat in Gladiator to the grueling boxing sequences in Cinderella Man. Yet he claims that learning to play the violin for Master and Commander was the single most difficult challenge he ever faced for a film. This admission is particularly striking when you consider the sheer physical punishment Crowe endured on other productions, including tearing both Achilles tendons during Gladiator and breaking both legs while filming Robin Hood without even realizing it until a decade later. For Master and Commander, Crowe had just 3 months to learn violin well enough to convincingly portray Captain Jack Aubrey playing classical pieces like Boccherini's La Musica, Notturna della Strada di Madrid, and Mozart's Violin Concerto No. 3. His teacher was Richard Tognetti, leader of the Australian Chamber Orchestra, who had to work intensively with the actor to make him look authentic on camera. Crowe was adamant that he needed to actually learn the instrument rather than just fake the finger movements, telling Tognetti early on that he had to be seen genuinely playing the violin, not just affecting the motions. The learning process proved unexpectedly torturous for Crowe, who discovered he was literally making himself sick while practicing. He kept developing a sore throat during filming, which he initially blamed on the smoke and water on set, but Tognetti identified the real problem. Crowe was holding his breath during difficult passages and wouldn't breathe again until he absolutely had to. Tognetti had to teach him to align his violin playing with his singing voice and to breathe through the notes rather than fighting against them. To help Crowe recognize when he was tensing up too much, they came up with an unusual solution. Crowe would place a piece of barley sugar candy between his teeth while practicing, and if he bit through it, that meant his body was too tense. Eventually, he mastered the technique enough to play, breathe, and eat the barley sugar simultaneously, but the months of training left him calling it the hardest preparation he'd ever endured for any role in his entire career. Fact 14. The original novels changed enemies to avoid alienating Americans. When Peter Weir and his team sat down to adapt Patrick O'Brian's beloved novels for the big screen, they faced an awkward historical problem that could have torpedoed the film's success in its most important market. The source material they were drawing from, particularly the novel The Far Side of the World, takes place during the War of 1812, and in O'Brian's original story, the enemy ship that Captain Aubrey pursues relentlessly isn't French at all, but American. This created a significant dilemma for a major Hollywood production that needed to appeal to American moviegoers who make up the largest box office audience in the world. The filmmakers made the controversial decision to shift the entire timeline of the story backward by 7 years to 1805, right in the middle of the Napoleonic Wars, and swap out the American antagonists for a French privateer called the Acheron. This change wasn't made lightly, and it sparked considerable debate among fans of the novels who noticed the historical sleight of hand. Producer Tom Rothman, who had championed the project for years, strongly disputed claims that the switch was made simply because American audiences wouldn't want to see themselves as villains. He argued instead that setting the story during the War of 1812 would have required lengthy exposition explaining why Britain and the United States were fighting each other, which would bog down the film's pacing and confuse viewers unfamiliar with that particular conflict. However, the practical reality remained unavoidable. Asking American audiences to root for the British Royal Navy against their own countrymen would have been a tough sell at the box office, especially for a film that cost $150 million to produce. The Napoleonic Wars provided a much safer backdrop, with Napoleon as a universally recognized villain that audiences worldwide could comfortably oppose. Some historians noted the irony that this change actually made certain references in the film anachronistic, particularly discussions about Lord Nelson, whose timeline now fit awkwardly into the revised story. Fact 15. Wind sounds were recorded by driving 70 miles per hour into a storm. The terrifying storm sequence where the HMS Surprise rounds Cape Horn stands out as one of the most viscerally realistic maritime scenes ever filmed, and the secret behind its authenticity involves a pickup truck, 1,000 feet of rope, and a sound designer willing to drive straight into dangerous weather conditions. Richard King, the film's sound designer, who would go on to win an Academy Award for his work on Master and Commander, needed to capture the specific sounds of wind screaming through a sailing ship's rigging during a massive storm. But traditional sound recording methods simply couldn't replicate the complex tones and variations that occur when gale force winds interact with miles of rope and canvas. King devised an ingenious, if somewhat dangerous, solution that involved constructing a large wooden frame and rigging it with 1,000 feet of line in the bed of a pickup truck. He then drove this contraption at 70 miles per hour directly into winds that were already blowing at 30 to 40 knots, which translates to roughly 35 to 46 miles per hour. The combined wind speed created the extreme conditions needed to generate authentic storm sounds, but King didn't stop there. To create the full range of audio textures he needed, from high-pitched shrieking sounds to lower whistling and sighing effects, he actually used barbecue grills and refrigerator grills to modulate the airflow across the ropes as he drove. By adjusting how the wind hit the rigging through these everyday kitchen items, King was able to produce dozens of distinct sound variations that mimicked exactly what sailors would have heard during an actual 19th century storm at sea. This painstaking attention to sonic detail meant that audiences hearing the Cape Horn sequence weren't just listening to generic wind effects or stock sounds pulled from a library, but rather the actual physical phenomenon of wind tearing through rope rigging at tremendous speeds, captured under conditions that closely approximated a real naval disaster.